convert fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. So the fraction bar represents division. And then to convert a fraction to a decimal, we just go ahead and divide. And if the decimal repeats, we're going to use a bar that goes over the number. So if we had a decimal like this and it just kept going on and on and on like this, this would, right, so it keeps going, we would just go 0.33, and we can just go ahead and put a bar over it. Or we could just go 0.3 and put a bar. Both would be considered correct. So let's look at the first example. So example 1, 5 students out of 20 are lactose intolerant. Write this fraction as a decimal. So we have 5 out of 20. Well, if we go ahead and go 5 and divide it by 20, we know we're going to have to add some zeros after this 5. So we go point, the decimal, and let's go ahead and just add 2 zeros. We may not have to use them all, but we'll just go with that. So 20 can't go into 5, but it can go into 50 2 times, because 20 times 2 is 40. So we go ahead and subtract. We get 50 minus 40, which is 10. So we notice we do need that second zero. We go ahead and bring down that zero. Now 20 can go into 100 how many times? We can go into it 5 times. So 20 times 5 is 100. We go ahead and subtract, we get 0. The next thing we have to do is bring that decimal straight up, and we get 0.25. And that's our decimal. So our fraction, 5 out of 20, can also be represented as a decimal as 0.25. Now let's do another example. So example 2, you have a class out of 18 students, and 5 of them are only children in their family. So represent this as a decimal. So we have 5 out of 18, so that's our fraction. Now we have 5, and we're going to go ahead and divide it by the bottom number, right? So it's 18 that's over there. So let's go ahead and add some zeros, just in case. Now 18 can go into 50 how many times? Well, what's 18 times 3? 8 times 3 is 24. Carry the 2. 1 times 3 is 3, times 2 is 5. So it's not quite 3. But 18 times 2, if we like to think about it, if we were to make this to be 20 times 2, I'll show you a trick right here. So 20 times 2 is equal to 40. But then we just go ahead and minus 4 because there's 2, right? Because we have 2 times, this is like a 2 difference. So we have to go 2 times 2, so that's 4. We get 36. So it's like you can almost do that. A lot of people can do that in their heads, and that's just like a nice quick way to do it. So 18 go into 50 2 times. We get 36. We go ahead and subtract. We get 14. We go ahead and bring down the 0. Now 18 can go into 140 how many times? Well, if 18 times 3 is 54, let's go ahead and say 6 times. So 18 times 6. So 8 times 6 is 48. Bring over the 4, so we have 108. Let's go ahead and just go 18 times 7. 56. Carry the 5. 7, 12. So there we go. So we have 7 here. 18 times 7 is 126. We go ahead and subtract. We got 14, so that's good, because it's less than 18, so we know we did it right. So now we have 140. And now, if we do, right, this goes in 140, so this would be a 7. 18 times 7 is 126. So notice how we're going to keep going. We just keep getting 14. So all we'd have to do right now is bring down the 0, and notice how it keeps repeating. So what we're going to do is bring our decimal straight up, and this is just going to keep going on the 7. So this fraction then, right, would be represented as 0.27, and we're not going to keep writing 7s forever. So we're just going to put the bar over just the 7 to indicate the 7 gets repeated. And this is our decimal. So now let's look at another example. But before that, let's go over how we convert decimals to fractions. So we're going to put the decimal over 1. And then we're going to multiply 10 on both the top and the bottom numbers for each number there is after the decimal. And then we're going to reduce if possible. So example 3, this will help kind of solidify what this means. If you say we have 0.10 of your students are left-handed, how would we write this as a fraction? So what we're going to do is put this number over 1. Then what we're going to do is multiply the top and the bottom by 10 for every number after the decimal. So notice we have a 1 and we have a 0. But technically that 0 doesn't really actually change if we have 0.10 or 0.1. This actually means the same thing. These are equal. So we actually only have to go ahead and multiply this by 10 on both the top and the bottom. And this will indicate this will make a little bit more sense here in a minute. So now 0.1 times 10. So if we remember how to multiply it by our decimals, 0 times 1 is 0, 1 times 1 is 1. We have 1 decimal, so it's just 1. Now anytime we go ahead and we can keep multiplying, but we're just actually going to have to reduce it, so we'll just leave it as 1. And then 1 times 10 is 10. So if we kept going, right, we would have ended up with 10 over 100, which would have to reduce to 1 over 10. So that's our answer. Now let's do another example. So example 3, we're going to write 0.35 as a fraction. So notice this one also has, right, 2 numbers after the decimal, but this one, this 5 is actually a number, it's not 0, so that's important. So what we're going to do then is we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 10 twice. So if we multiply something by 10 twice, that means we're going to multiply it by 100. Right? Because we have 10 times 10, and that's 100. So we're just going to shorten this step here and just multiply it by this. So remember, when we multiply, say, by 100, that means we're going to move the decimal over to the right twice. That's what happens there. So we're going to end up with 35. 100 times 1 is 100. Then, when we go ahead and reduce this fraction, we notice that both end with a 5 or a 0. So both can be divisible by 5. So 35 divided by 5, so we're going to reduce. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So this would be our reduced fraction.